We are all here in the room, and sorry, was it Lieutenant? I know it's Fitzgerald, but is it Lieutenant?
Yes.
Okay, Lieutenant Fitzgerald, back up. We do have your map in front of us. You can't see it here, and let us know, Mr. Beck, if we need to turn that at all, or if you've got it. But if you can walk us through this parking plan.
Sure, let me just make sure I can share my screen. Yep, of course, Paul Beck is on the ball. Even though he tricked me so badly the other day, but we'll talk about that another time. Let's see. He played a practical joke on me with Mr. Johns. Anyway, let's see. Do you guys see my screen?
We do.
Okay. So the reason we're here, so I have Lance and Lieutenant Fitzgerald because the 1 hour parking was removed a couple of years ago to reduce sign clutter. If you recall, the 1 hour parking was not being enforced, and we had signs all over Uptown. So as part of our wayfinding and our Uptown revitalization effort, we did remove those signs and said we would deal with them as needed. So now we think it's going to be needed because the Marilyn Rodman Performing Arts Center is now, up fully running again, and Shoveltown Brew Pub is expected to open this summer. So with those two uses going, we know that corner is going to be challenged, and we acknowledge that that certain nights of the week there is going to be a challenge up there, and we want to make sure that we're not waiting and being reactive and trying to be proactive to this. Also, we do have some residential units coming online. The 50 units at 29 Wall Street, that's right next to the post office, they're expected to come online in the fall of 2022. Actually, the 4 units above the fire station are supposed to come on board this summer. And then 15 units on the site of the Keating Funeral Home is next fall of 23. So, we acknowledge that all that activity uptown, we feel that's important because that's bringing people uptown, and it's going to, we're going to start to see more businesses want to open up because, with businesses like customers, and when we have customers built in, that's kind of how you make an uptown, walkable and livable, is by just, sort of creating people living up there. The sidewalks won't roll up at night. So we do have some uptown parking areas on street. I won't read them all, but you can see that the ones on the left are the on-street parking areas. And right now they have no signs except a couple limited, maybe 15-minute signs. Then we have some public lots, and that's the Central Street lot behind the businesses, the library lot, which has 22 spaces, the town hall lot, which has about 65, and then the Schneider lot, which has 44. And here's a map. Hopefully the folks at home can see this. That's why I gave you the bigger one, just so you'll be able to get a good look. So that kind of shows there's orange. I don't know if you can see it, but there's orange in the street parking areas, and then yellow are the public lots that we have. So originally I had grand plans. Planners always have grand plans. So I thought we were going to come up with this fabulous plan of hourly limits and overnight parking areas. And we unfortunately learned that it's a little more difficult than that. And that's why, for example, the 1 hour parking signs weren't necessarily being enforced in the past. So I'm going to turn it over for a quick second to Lieutenant Fitzgerald so he can kind of explain why we can't create, sort of 4 hour parking areas or various parking areas throughout town, why that's a challenge. So Ken, do you want to go ahead and just sort of explain some of that?
Sure. Thank you. I guess I'm the bearer of bad news. So just by way of background, I started my career in Southborough years ago. Small town, no parking issues, little downtown. I spent 14 years in Natick, where parking is, there's committees, there's groups, there's a parking department, there's a whole branch of government dealing with parking and placards and meters, and here we are in the middle. We're somewhere in the middle. We're kind of steaming in that direction slowly. But so when Paige had asked us about the time enforcement, the easy answer is, from a public safety / law enforcement perspective, generally speaking, what our people out on the street deal with for parking effectively are 2 issues. The restrictions, the major restrictions such as handicap and fire lanes, that sort of thing, and then the issues of blocking a fire hydrant, blocking a street, blocking a crosswalk, blocking snow removal. Those are the things that are easy enforceable by the police, who are either called somewhere or drive by and see it. When you get into the parking restrictions, this zone is for this, commercial unloading only, no parking Tuesdays. But when you get into those specific regulations, especially things like overnight and time limit, it gets challenging. Time limit, how do we know that this car was here 4 hours and 1 minute, 3 hours and 59 minutes? You can't chalk tires anymore. We can't dedicate somebody to sit and watch a car for 4 hours for a $20 parking ticket. There's no ROI there. So that gets challenging. The longer the time limit, the more the challenge, obviously. And then overnight creates its own issue that if we send our officers out and say, hey, 1 a.m., go check and write parking tickets. Well, what's to say when the person comes in and appeals the ticket, they say, oh, I was at a friend's house. I went home at 1:30. So the time restrictions become very challenging. And I don't think we're there yet. I mean, hey, we headed that way? Sure. Could be 5 years out, could be 10 years out. But so that's what with Paige and I and Lance, we discussed that when you start with the real different restrictions, and it gets challenging. So that's why we had suggested there's some other ideas coming up here that might be a good step towards controlling parking a little more than we do now, but not going full blown into urban downtown with an actual parking meters, parking enforcement people, that sort of big step.
And I think that's the challenge with all the sign clutter, like we had before. If we have all these 1 hour signs and then no one's enforcing it, it is just a lot of clutter. So now here we are, somewhere in the middle, especially I think with the overnight parking and the long-term parking. I think now we're seeing some residents that are, leaving cars, especially during the snowstorms, that really became noticeable, on the streets for long amounts of times.
So, so when we all sat down to discuss this, after Ken crushed our dreams, my planning dreams, we started thinking about, okay, what can we do? And Lance, since I made you join us meeting, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it. So we came up with some suggestions on what to do next, and data collect, because one of the points we contend is that there is ample parking uptown. And I know that folks don't necessarily like to walk, but we have the Schneider lot, we have the town hall lot, heck, we have the Central Street lot, and then even the library. So we do have some parking uptown. It's just that it's not necessarily, visible from a venue. So with that discussion, Lance had some great ideas around data collection. So I'll let him sort of explain some of that and what we're hoping to get out of this.
Sure thing. Thanks, Paige. So I think, one of the things we talked about is the perception, and we want to get away from that by just starting to collect some real data on the issue, sort of establish a baseline during, peak events. We have, two particular events right now that we're going to try to collect data for over at the, I forget specifically one's Paige. What are the events planned? The comedy event there?
Yeah, it's going to be the Rodman Awards and then also a comedy show. So on May 14th and May 19th. Yes. Right.
So, those are the two events we're targeting to start with. The police department has generously offered to use their drone to actually collect aerial images of the lot, so we can actually have a record of what the parking looked like at an event like that around downtown at these lots. And then we'll have a historic record, and we can kind of see, get some of this documentation prior to Shoveltown and these other places opening, and then, continue kind of observing the situation as times move forward. The other issue was that, I don't know if you want me to talk about the takeout parking zone that we talked about. In lieu of the, time limits of an hour or less, the police department thought that 5 minutes approximately may be a relatively enforceable option for quick pickup areas around certain types of businesses that may or may not be interested in having that near their business. However, if we're going to do that, we should discuss having a policy in place for the Board of Selectmen to consider those requests. So we don't want to obviously dedicate too many parking spots to just 5-minute parking, and take away affect other businesses negatively from that. But there may actually be a place and a benefit of having some parking, places designated for that kind of thing. Paige, you want to jump in?
Sure. So that's sort of when we stepped back and was like, okay, so what can we do? So to Lance's point, collecting data, getting an idea of what really goes on uptown. Because everybody's heard me say that, the Rentham Outlet Mall, you go to that outlet mall, you park thousands of feet away from your destination, and you don't think twice about it. You go to any mall. I mean, not that people go to malls much anymore, the traditional malls, but you go anywhere, you park pretty far away and you walk, and it almost doesn't faze you. But when you get uptown in any community, it just feels odd to not have parking right there. So we do believe that there's also going to be sort of an education effort. We would also be working closely with the venues, the theater in Shoveltown, to make sure that they are completely making clear where the parking opportunities are. Perhaps we can even get them to include information with tickets and reservations. So these are some of the ideas we've had. And then I skipped over the other thing that I think is important is obviously, Leah, I think you mentioned the snowstorms. We started talking about, knowing that we're going to have more residences uptown and knowing they might have visitors or, more than one car. Where are we going to direct folks to park? When we have a snow ban or if we want folks to go, and, we talked to Lance and Chris about whether, maybe the town hall lot could be used, and they just had to be out by a certain hour in the morning, because we know town hall doesn't open till 8. The schools are priority, and that sort of thing tends to go first. And then, getting to town hall, it gives a little more time to do it. But we're at the beginning of that. So, but these are sort of the ideas that for phase one, we're calling this phase one, that we start talking about and looking at for that. Before I go to the next slide, does anybody on the board want to say anything about this? Any questions or comments on that? Sort of where we're at?
Just obviously the snow is going to be crazy, because even if you're telling people you can park in the town hall lot or over at the IGO or something, even if there's no school, the administration, unless it's a real bad storm, they go in. So just because there's no school.
I don't think we're telling anyone to park at the schools.
Well, no, but you see people park there.
Oh, really?
Like when I'm dropping Jimmy in the morning, sometimes you'll see some cars.
Oh, I know where you
what
mean
I
in the front, yeah.
But I mean, even, uptown or other places, we're saying you could park in town hall. Just because we've had snow, that doesn't mean Bill has called off work. I mean, I guess if it's a really bad storm, you would make that decision, but the DPW, the guys still need to get in plow. So, they're having that, okay, they're there till 8 o'clock, but when the snow is gonna be a real struggle, if people hit some of these places and they're not out when the guys are.
Well, usually in a situation like that, we would exercise the parking emergency and then notify people they couldn't park in those areas.
But are we, my thought looking at particularly Bird Street is we have the snow emergency. We tell people they can't park on the road. They park on the road. Cars are covered with mounds of snow. They sit there. Like, can we do a better job? I know we can't enforce like everything, but to me, those big snow ones are probably ones that we can, people know, oh, if I don't move my car, nothing happens. So what do? You don't move your car. So maybe I think with the snow stuff, we can probably maybe make a closer look at that and really start ticketing, or even hopefully not, but towing cars that don't, kind of listen to the snow emergency. So hopefully we can come up with a place for them to go, but then make sure we actually get those cars off the road, because, it really ends up affecting like the sidewalks and the walkability. So, when that car does finally move and there's a ton of snow, it does become a bit of a pedestrian hazard, I think.
And you're right, the goal isn't to want to ticket people or have somebody towed, but the reality is, if it happens to you once, you probably won't.
Right.
You
And
probably won't.
pedestrian safety is important uptown, and, it does kind of get in the way.
But I think the problem is folks, if folks don't have parking, where do they put their car on a snow ban? I think that's what you're running into, is that it might not be, sort of laziness or not wanting to move. They might actually not know where to put their car. So this is what we're sort of thinking, is maybe we think about it. And I just threw out town hall parking lot. We discussed that briefly. And again, they'd have to get out in time. There'd have to be a time limit so that it would give the DPW time to plow it. But we don't have any decisions yet. It's just sort of throwing it out as, let's explore this and let's come up with a plan. Would Schneider allow them to park over on the Schneider lot? And then, with the understanding that they get out by a certain hour and then we could clear it completely. We don't yet have the answers, but we're sort of raising the as a phase one look. You know, we'd look at the takeout parking policy. We look at the sort of what we're going to do for overnight parking and snow emergency parking and like where and when. And then also, you know, working aggressively with the venues to kind of make sure that when they're attracting people to town, that they're telling them where to park so that we're not ending up frustrated. So that's kind of where we are on this.
Yeah, Dennis had something too.
Then in the future,
Our newest
you know,
person first, please.
go ahead.
You know, Paige, one of the things I've seen in other communities is a partnership with the local churches, because, you know, certain times of the week, those lots are completely vacant. You know, you have funerals, you have to work around that, but certainly during the week, there's a lot of overflow parking availability with the churches. So I've seen that done, actually, and there can even be a stipend worked out with the church that would be welcome in terms of freeing up the spaces.
That's a great idea. So these are the type of things, we're not saying we have the answers, and this is the kind of input we're looking for as we move forward. Because we are looking, just so you know, a teaser here for my next slide is, we are opening up a 1-month comment period. So that's why this is sort of an effort to get folks talking about it, particularly stakeholders, and Dennis, that's a great idea. So these are the ideas we want to hear, and we could start formulating a plan that we would bring back.
A couple of comments, Paige. One, two-parter. What about that house that we're going to tear down, that Mr. King's going to tear down and make a little bit of a parking lot? I don't see that on your map. Is that just because it hasn't been done yet?
Correct. There you go. But it's coming up. But no, it will not be ready. This, you know, it's not in our phase one, only because,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So what's going to happen out at Shoveltown is, you know, they're working fast and furiously on the Shoveltown and also the 4 apartments above. Then they're getting ready to, I believe in the fall, they've been delayed, to remove Keating's funeral home. And at the same time, they're going to demolish that house at 15 to 17 Market Street. At that point, because they're going to lose the funeral home area where they've kind of been having some staging and whatnot, they're going to move some of their equipment over to 15 to 17 Market. So they have they have the rights to use that until they're done with construction, and then they're going to construct our 14 space parking lot there. So it's probably another year or so before that's ready to go. But that is coming. Yes, you are right.
And as an offshoot to that, that would be an ideal location for off-street parking during a winter ban. It's not an important lot, yet it could be one where, you know.
Easily accessible for all.
Exactly. Just as a thought to, down the road, like you said, now,
that's a
a
great
year from now.
idea.
And Paige, you know, I would really like us to, maybe it's walking around and talking to a lot of the businesses, but with the number of businesses we have that could be takeout parking, it could really eat up a lot of it. And I think there's a lot of education, like being from town, I don't know, I never go to Subway or Sam's and park out front. Like, there's always parking out back, you know, so maybe these businesses, as they have takeout orders, reminding people there's parking out back, you know, really besides on this list that we see here, Foxborough Nutrition and Primo's, there is private or town parking either attached to or beside it. Like for Lovely Pizza, for example, I know there was a big thing with the 15-minute spots there, but there's all the spots next to Sober Camel. You know, the property owner owns those spots too. So, you know, instead of it becoming an automatic 15-minute parking spot out front, what are they doing on the property with the landlord, you know, where their business is, or with the parking out back? We also had some talk about some of the alleyways. So the alley between the Commons and FCA's, I'm looking out at the alley, sorry, that's why I'm looking out the window, is definitely the widest one, but there are some other alleys that can use some cleanup that can, I think, be a little bit more comfortable for pedestrian passage between some of the other ones. So we talked about maybe cleaning up some of those alleys, and what can we do, you know, to make people, whether it's lighting or just passability, be more comfortable, especially, you know, as we get further down Central Street, being able to pass through to that Central Street lot there.
And just another thought, Paige, if those of us that have been on the board a little bit longer remember I think the first time we talked about parking issues was when Union Straw opened up. You know, it brought up Foxborough House of Pizza and Primo's and things like that. But Paige, at one point you talked about, if I remember correctly, a parking app where if someone's coming into a town and And I'm not an app necessarily person, but is that a real possibility now that we're a couple of years down the road? Is there apps out there, and can we get Foxborough as part of that?
I don't know if there are general apps. I think we'd have to maybe, I think the vision we had was more of a, an uptown app where you could get information and including parking there. But that's a good suggestion too, Doc, I can look into whether there's just a general app that rather than creating from scratch that we're actually joining in on something. So I can check on that to see if there is something like that. Because I've learned from trying to, maintain the EDC site that this is not my area of expertise. So app building and that sort of thing, I don't even know what to do, but I'm sure there are a lot of great minds out there who have solved that problem. So I will definitely look into that. That's a good idea.
And I know, Paige, you had an intern last year. I don't know if you do again, or I heard there might be a shared one, but, I know there was a lot of like car counting and looking and just going out and manually, maybe helping the police, just, walking around and kind of visually seeing what we've got and taking counts, at various times during the day as well.
Sure.
Can I ask one other question?
So,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Paige, can I ask one more question? I'm sorry, but not to you, to Lieutenant Fitzgerald. Why can't you chuck cars anymore?
It's unconstitutional.
No way.
There was case law. It was particular to a drunk driving case, but the case law applies. So the person, you can do anything, but is it lawful? No. Is it going to be overturned when the person comes in to say, I didn't park there 4 hours, I want to appeal? You can't use the police chalked your tires. Well, if they knew, they could cite the case law, and in theory, in a actual now, a parking appeal isn't a courtroom, but
Right.
it's just not legal for us to do. So it's telling our people to do something that the courts have said is kind of out of bounds. It's just not right. So there are places that parking meter maids, for a better term, they can still do it. They're not law enforcement. They're enforcing a parking regulation like ordinance, like Boston traffic in Boston. The parking, they're not police officers. They're a separate division. Where I worked in Natick, the parking attendants, they fell under the police. They were separate people. They would go do it. So, and we had talked about this in the group. I said, okay, we're going to have to expand government here because we're going to need the parking attendant. We're going to need the person to collect the money. We're going to need 4 full-time positions, and that's where it goes 15 years down the road. That's the 15, 20-year outlook. Is when you stuff, thousands of people, and it eventually will happen. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, but that's where it heads to control parking, unless if we can get ahead of it now, which I think we're.
And then you'll know further down the road, you'll know what the problems are, how many people are parking, how many people are complaining they can't find somewhere. And Paige, I'm sure when you say advertising, we want to be business friendly and help the takeout places or any of the restaurants and establishments. But yeah, they can just help themselves by the advertising. Put it on your website,
Right, parking out back.
where
Make
it
a
is.
sign,
Yeah, yeah.
Because a lot of these
Exactly.
establishments, I think we have a lot of parking and we have a lot of it's really education, and getting, hopefully the business owners, like I know the package store has a sign that says it's out back and it's big and it's marked, and what can we do there?
Plus,
as
and
well?
something too, obviously, we're not downtown Boston, but when you say, people do get lazy, they want to find a parking space that's close. When you find one that's close, you're like, oh my God, look at this, I found this spot. But the reality is, if you were to go to most places in town, go to a theater, you're not going to park near where you're going. You're going to have to park somewhere, and the options that we have are short walks. So, get out there, be a little healthy. Do a couple of steps.
Dennis and Seth had your hands up. I'll let you.
So new person.
New guy
can
again.
Yeah,
ask
new
twice.
guy again card.
Paige, the Patriots have a huge parking problem, and they use a number of these apps that you're talking about, so I don't know if they could be a resource, or they could be somebody we could piggyback on in terms of what they're doing, but they are a source of multiple apps that really manage parking, right up the street.
That's a great idea. Sure, Dennis, that's great.
Sorry, we're all having a minute. Go ahead, Seth.
I was wondering what Doc was doing. I'm like, wow.
I was very quietly trying to open the.
And then I felt Doc come up over my shoulder.
That mint looked great. So.
Go ahead, Seth.
So I was thinking about the Schneider parking lot off of Railroad Ave. I know town does not own that lot. But anecdotally speaking, people don't want to park there. It's sketchy looking, it's overgrown, it just doesn't look like a town municipal parking lot. So people don't necessarily want to use it, even though maybe they don't want to walk, but there's that. And then across the way from that, off of Neponset Avenue, is a gated off parking lot that hasn't probably had a car in it in 15 years or more. My kids learn to ride their bike there, but it's just sort of like the nature's taken over. So that's available space, again, that must be owned by Schneider, right? But it's been vacant for years and years and years.
Could we talk to Schneider about, if they're open to us, creating more than just a wayfinding sign, like a real, sign that you would, like you said, when you pull in, that you'd feel comfortable, especially, you can see the wayfinding signs if you come from Railroad, but sometimes going straight from Bird, like to have that sign right there, if you're coming from the theater, if you're coming from the restaurant, that visibility that would show that it's kind of more an official lot may be helpful.
Yeah, we actually, we have received some great feedback from one of the residents that asking for that, to have a sign, so if you're coming straight from Bird, that it definitely makes it clear that, you see the sign, because it's sideways when you're coming from Bird. And also, I didn't realize that when we made the wayfinding signs, there was an arrow going the wrong way. So that's why there isn't one over not by O'Reilly's. We should have a sign on the common, on the roundabout, that rotary there, that points down Bird Street that way, and the sign has the wrong arrow, so that's not. So we are having that one redone, and we are going to add one to Bird Street. So I also understand we could have something nicer looking and make it look more welcoming, but at a minimum, we do want to get the P sign up there straight on, and then an arrow up at the common, so that folks know when they're going around that they can go that way. So those are two things on our list right now. Leah, I think when we talked previously, a couple months ago, the other issue is if we're going to ask folks to park at, say, for example, the Schneider lot, we need to make sure that, there's enough lighting and that it's a safe passage and that it's clear. We did talk about the town hall lot, but that, Market Street's a little rough. So we talked about maybe having wayfinding, direct them up to, the common, and then walk down School Street instead. So these are all the kind of ideas we're thinking of, is how best to direct people. Would probably rather have folks walk up to the common than go down Market. They might be noisier and whatnot. We can't keep them from doing it, but we don't need to attract them to that area, pretty residential area. So these are all the considerations. We'd like to sort of get comments, and we're going to start thinking through these things and hopefully come forward with some suggestions. And we'll have more information about the app. We can talk to Schneider and, talk to some of the business and bring some more information forward with a bit of a plan. So let me get to future phases. So one of the things we want to acknowledge is that when the theater has an event going on, one of their major events, there is going to be uptown congestion. I mean, I haven't been around for more than, I've only been around about 6 years, but, I would imagine for the decades when there's a major theater event, Foxborough has always had congestion. It's just inevitable. So we can't, it's kind of like you don't build parking lots for the day after Thanksgiving at shopping malls, because otherwise for the rest of the year, you'd be looking at a sea of parking. Obviously the theater has 0 parking, so that is our challenge. Adding Shoveltown is certainly going to maybe, it's going to add to that. So we're going to likely have some concerns around that. But we do want to sort of address the challenges as they arise, all the while being proactive. And then the other point to bring up is we need to be looking at the public parking lot that's going to open in a year or so over at Market Street, and sort of what the policies are. Do we want to allow overnight? Are we allowing overnight commercial vehicles? We also have the land behind Judy's Florist. That actually, I don't know if you're aware, and actually this is where the map came in. Here's this map that shows, so that little parcel B with an arrow there off Market Street, the town actually owns that property. And I don't know that anybody knew that, but it came up when we did the survey. So, we'll have to probably work with Judy's or figure something out, because they've always used that, and, they haven't been able to lately, but so we might want to figure out what wants to be done there. The other concern I have is that if they can't park there, would they put their vans and whatnot into that public parking? We want to make sure that there's fairness and equity, and that as we move forward. So that's something that I think, again, we don't need that yet. We're not quite there. That'll be another year or so, but those are things we should start thinking about. And then, as I mentioned, other wayfinding improvements, improved signage, lighting, et cetera. We could think about those ideas of how to improve it when people are walking, driving, and whatnot. And so we are open to suggestions.
Paige, one more thing.
And then,
I know
Go ahead.
you've heard me talk about this, and we've talked with Chris, and I've talked to the police about it, but also is Rock Hill, now that it's two-way before the stop sign and one-way after, on a busy theater day, my daughter was volunteering up there, so I was up there for like every show, cars think that the whole street is one way. So there was cars, it's a very narrow road, and cars were parked on both sides of that. So I know we were making like temporary signage, but I don't know that we've made permanent signage to make sure the cars know that they can only park on one side of Rock Hill past the stop sign. Do you know, did that signage ever go in?
I'm not sure, Lance, do you have anything on that? Because I know Rock Hill came up a little bit, and it seems like we're going to be doing some striping and whatnot, but Lance, do you recall anything on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure the status of the signage off the top of my head. I could look into it, but I know that we're planning to stripe in the actual side of street parking there, parallel parking spots on the one-way portion. So that'll be delineated and enforceable once that's in. In terms of, we did talk about putting some kind of, actually painting in, something, maybe, I don't know if it's going to be double yellow or what exactly down the rest of Rock Hill to indicate that it's two-way, though, to add to that as well. So, but I'll have to check on the status of the signage. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's that two-way part, if you're not from town and you see cars parked up the left, you assume that before the stop sign, it's the same. And I literally saw the street impassable at some points from cars on both sides, so. just have to keep
Was
an eye
that
on
in the recent or like 6 months ago? Do you know?
That was, I'd have to go back and look, probably
Okay.
4 months ago or so. It was like kind of right as the world started to like really open, like February, so maybe only two or
Okay.
so.
Okay. So what we're suggesting here, we learned through the Rotary conversation that, we want to do things slowly and make sure we get some feedback. So what we're doing is we're opening up a comment period for anybody, particularly, businesses in Uptown, but also, obviously the residents are customers. So we're very open to hearing comments. We've gone ahead and created a Survey Monkey. It's not a survey though. I just put in text boxes so that folks can enter in comments, questions, or concerns. We want to hear from folks. There's a QR code on the screen, so if anyone at home, they can just scan that. And then we have the link here, and we can get this up on the web tomorrow. And I know Christina was saying she was going to get this out. So we want to get out there. So we're open to hearing input from anybody who has suggestions, concerns, or questions. Then we would like to come back to the June 7th meeting, so to bring up what we found, what we learned, and start talking about policies and/or a policy so that we can start ordering signs and come up with something so that when Shoveltown does open, we at least are ready for that first surge.
All right, so
One
you'll
more
be
thing.
back June
I-
7th. Sorry.
Sorry, I just want to say I did get a text from Chris. I guess he's watching, saying that there are no parking signs up on Rock Hill.
Okay, great.
Great.
I haven't seen the issue in a while, so I must have fixed it.
That's great. And the ironic thing is, as we talked about, is the most challenging times from what we can hear is that when it's like a Foxborough event, because all the Foxborough folks know all the secret parking spots, and they kind of like, oh, we know, and they know there's no enforcement. So, when you have outer towners come, they tend to want to follow the rules. They're not going to go park here, there anyway, because they're very worried about getting tickets. They don't know, but it's ironic that it's a lot of times it's our residents and our folks that are familiar with the town that kind of push the envelope a little bit. So we just need to, start working on the policies and education, to Leah's point, is just letting folks know, where they can go, because they probably feel like they have no options. And we want to get rid of that misperception that there is no parking uptown. Tell folks to wear their sneakers.
And maybe a drop-off zone, just as we're talking to for the Orpheum. Like so someone did bring up to me handicap parking, that, there's obviously the spot at the gas station, but then the next closest one is in front of Memorial Hall. So when I was at a show, someone with a handicap placard actually came up to me and let me know how challenging and how far the distance was, and if it was compliant within so many feet of the theater with how many spots there were, so.
One other thought that you should consider is the, I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, page note was an Uber drop-off as well, you know, for, you know, any kind of, you know, services that are going to be available to people to drop people off in the center of town.
Yeah, and
Alright,
that's
so you'll be
one
back-
reason we are a little hesitant about these 50 or 5-minute drop-off takeouts, because, you know, with DoorDash and whatnot, we don't necessarily want to encourage DoorDashers to be pulling up and taking those spots and pulling in. So we, you know, we also need to think about those type of services, you know, where those folks get directed to pick up from restaurants, so they're not taking up prime real estate. I'm not sure. My son was a DoorDash driver. I'm not sure they listen, but we can certainly try. So that's kind of where we are. You know, I don't know if there's any questions or comments, but I would ask that folks, you know, give us their ideas or concerns so that we make sure we are addressing what's out there, and, you know that we are paying attention, we are aware, and we, you know, we're going to be trying to be prepared as Wall Street comes online, you know, to have some suggestions and have some information for, you know, overflow parking, snow parking, that type of thing. So I don't think we could just pretend, you know, to not have overnight parking when you have a snow ban. I mean, you have to sort of figure out how to help these people if there are going to be people on the street. I know we had trouble with Bird, and it just seems like there will be some overflow parking at times that we should address.
All right, so we'll hear more on June 7th after your comment period.
Yes.
All right, great.
Thank you, Paige.
Thanks, Paige.
Great-
Thanks, Lance.
Great
All right.
discussion.
Thank you, everybody.